talking about essential comics, we're going to discuss what we each think are essential comic book origin stories.
So I've always been a real big fan of the Flash. The Flash is one of my favorite comic book characters. I resonate with him for more reasons than I can possibly imagine. Now, when I ask, someone, what is the origin of the Flash? If they know the origin, they're going to describe the origin that appears in DC Showcase number 4. Right? This is the origin of Barry Allen's Flash. It's an essential origin comic because they haven't had to change anything. You know what I mean? It was done once and it was done right. Barry Allen is a police officer. And he's in a lab, and lightning strikes, he gets covered in chemicals, and now he has super speed. That is the essential story. You look at the TV shows, you look at other retellings of Barry Allen's origin, it's always those essential key components, and those come from DC Showcase number 4. It's how I got introduced to Barry Allen's Flash.
My essential origin comic for a new reader is probably DC New Frontier. It's a really good starting point for like somebody who just wants to kind of get a feel for the whole universe. But New Frontier is such a good mix of like Silver Age feel with like the politics of the time that are still like kind of relevant. It feels like Watchmen with the DC characters almost. That's like how I describe it to people sometimes. A story with the DC characters that's fantastical, but you have these real elements that help make it a little more hard hitting too. Like I love the stuff with Hal Jordan during the Korean War, and then all the stuff with Superman liberating people, and then there's like the Challengers. There's just so many cool little moments in that book that are fantastic, and I think hit really hard for somebody who's like just getting into these characters.
No, I definitely think DC New Frontier has a lot of underrated political themes because it is a product of its time. Not a product of its time, but it respects the time period in which it occupies. And
exactly.
I think a lot of superhero comics show superheroes buddy with the government, let's stop the big bad guy, and you know what, a lot of DC comics did that when they first came out. It doesn't acknowledge the golden age part, I don't think, but like during like the 50s and the 60s, it dives into how the government had some problematic attitudes and beliefs towards certain groups, and it's really cool to see superheroes interrogate that. Specifically Wonder Woman. There's a really great moment with Wonder Woman in that book that I always come back to in my head. I appreciate how it's willing to say that, because I think retroactively as comic book readers, we don't like to grapple with the horror of comics past. But DC New Frontier is a book that isn't afraid to do that. So shout out DC New Frontier.
It was It was a little underwhelming for me. I can barely remember anything about that comic. The only thing I can remember about that comic is the beginning with the losers and like how there's a dinosaur.
That was so fire.
But like, yeah, and I kind of know what you're talking about the Wonder Woman thing. And I didn't read it like that long ago. I think I read it like 2 years ago.
You don't remember? With Superman, I need kryptonite. But for you,
yeah. But you know why I remember that? I remember that because that was on TikTok for like months. And people were like making edits about the movie. I think the movie's probably better than the comic. I would almost rather just be like, yo, dude, watch the movie, watch the animated movie instead of reading the comic.
Anyway, what's your favorite essential comic origin?
Batman and Robin by Patrick Gleason and Peter J. Tomasi.
Wow.
And the reason for this, it's not a Batman origin story, but it is a Damian Wayne story. Damian Wayne has his genesis in Grant Morrison's book, and I think that is like the Damian Wayne origin story. So it depends on what you define as a origin story. But Batman and Robin by Tomasi and Gleason, it gives you the origin story of Damian, right? You get to see New 52 retcon to Morrison's kind of introduction to Damian. It really boils it down and makes it easy to understand. But on top of that, it shows you who Damian Wayne is. And I think to me, that's what makes an origin story. It's not about seeing how these characters, got their powers. It's about seeing how these characters came to be who they are. And I love Damian Wayne because he's such a interesting guy. He is kind of like Bruce in a lot of ways. He's broken, he's angry, he's violent, but he had the tools to kind of tap into that before he was able to grapple with his rage. And so seeing Bruce interact with this like young rage-filled boy is just so entertaining, because in a lot of ways Bruce can't even be mad, because that is a reflection of himself, both literally in terms of the fact that he's his kid, but figuratively as well, in terms of the fact that like his upbringing and his rage mirrors what Bruce would have felt at that age as well. Seeing Damian mellow out and learn and change as a person feels like the origin of the Damian Wayne we know today. And I love Damian today. And I think the Damian I love has his roots in this book.
As someone who read the Morrison run and was introduced to Damian, and prior to reading the Morrison run was so excited to see the origin of Damian Wayne becoming Robin, was so let down by what Morrison did with the character, and in general at that point was just let down by the character. Points to Morrison for coming up with, Damian Wayne, but like to me, Damian Wayne is so uninteresting and so like kind of boring in Morrison's run.
Okay.
Oh my god. It sounds like, obviously I can't speak too much on it because I haven't read it. It sounds like Tomasi is the one who like made Damian who he is. I don't think Morrison did that. Morrison just made him a bratty kid. That's not that creative.
I do think Damian grows in Morrison's run. And I think that growth primarily happens, funnily enough, in the pages of Batman and Robin. But it's Batman and Robin written by Morrison with art by Frank Quietly. And in that context, like Dick Grayson's Batman and Damian's Robin, and you got to see their kind of dynamic as they bounce off each other. And that's where Damian really learns to like find like more compassion in his heart. And then the New 52 Batman and Robin run with Tomasi and Gleason is where you get to really see the genesis of like the Damian and Bruce dynamic. And that's what I love. I like the Damian and Bruce dynamic, but I also love the Damian and Dick dynamic. I think that's a really fun arc and probably my favorite from Morrison's entire run.
I don't know. I just feel like if Damian would have stayed dead, I think that would have been like, it would have been fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think, like, I think
That's
if
so fucking crazy.
I think if Morrison would have kept Damian Wayne dead, it would have been something that people kind of talk about here and there. I don't think Damian to start was that impactful.
Well,
And
also,
I don't think Morrison thought that either because he killed him
that
so many times.
Damian, like the New 52 run happens while Morrison's run is happening.
Yeah. So I guess it sounds like because other people were able to have their hands on the character, that's why he's impactful. But what I'm also saying is that Morrison doesn't make. I think Morrison doesn't make the character impactful. I get what you're saying. That's what you're saying. So that's what it sounds like. I think the most essential comic book origin is Amazing Fantasy 15, the origin debut of Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Holy moly. Not only are you introducing the greatest character of all time, but you're doing it in a way that is so different and it's showing an idea and concept that is really shaking things up in superhero comics and just in general comics. It's also just fun. It's entertaining and it's amazing 10 out of 10 character work that shows you a real story.
You don't get real stories often, guys. So
back then you didn't, because listen. So
I'm thinking about how you're arguing like we all have like full books and you're like 8 pages.
Yeah.
This trumps all of that. Like,
no, bro, for real. Because it's the introduction of the character. Like it's definitely better than fucking Showcase number 4 over here.
All right, bro.
Listen,
stop the glaze. Stop the glaze. You're out here talking about like back then there weren't a lot of really good comic stories. Was your favorite intro writer not the bullpen that wrote that era of stories?
No, I said DC's Silver Age was boring comics. Marvel Silver Age is peak comics. DC Silver Age is nonsense. It's ridiculous.
What's your favorite Silver Age book from DC?
Nothing, dude. It's not worth it. There's none of them are worth it.
What did you read?
Really?
I've read Brave and the Bold, World's Finest, and some Batman.
It's not a really large sample size.
But still, I mean, with those examples, dude, World's Finest is supposed to be this like big deal. It's Batman and Superman, and that stuff was it was actually pretty cool. But I thought it was cool when I was a kid. I love the origin of Spider-Man because it shows you this character that isn't this built up muscular superhero that can fly, has a flashy costume. It shows you this kid that's vulnerable, that has real life problems, and those real life problems don't stop when he gets bitten by the radioactive spider and becomes said superhero. He doesn't even really become a superhero right away because he is a selfish character. He is a kid. Hell, dude, if I got powers right now, I probably wouldn't do a good thing with it. But like, it shows you how irresponsible someone can be, and it feels realistic. And then it shows you the consequences of those selfish actions. One of the biggest misrepresentations of Spider-Man's origin in other media is that of the killer of Uncle Ben. Peter lets the killer get away. That's what makes his origin story so impactful and so different and unique. He is partly responsible for the death of Uncle Ben because the guy who kills Uncle Ben, his father figure, walks past him and Spider-Man lets him go. In other media, you know, most famously Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, right? They give Peter, Spider-Man, a reason to be upset in that moment and let the criminal go. He gets scammed. The guy doesn't give him the money. Peter gets mad. The guy famously says the line, I forgot the part where that's my problem. And this dude is robbing the showrunner, the dude who just scammed Peter. And Peter lets the dude go through. The dude hits the elevator, runs down. He gets away with the money. The showrunner looks at Peter and he's like, you could have crushed that guy. Because Peter definitely could have. And Peter hits him back with the line, I forgot where that's my problem. That's really relatable to audiences. It was a good feel moment. It was like yeah, dude, screw you, guy. How does that feel? Karma. And then you find out that the dude kills Uncle Ben. Technically, right? Spider-Man 3 kind of ruined that. Right? It gave a reason for Peter to be, quote unquote, a dick in that moment. Amazing Fantasy 15 does not do that. Amazing Fantasy 15, Peter uses his powers, uses it to, do this fancy little show, gets paid the full amount, and he just doesn't care that the showrunner is getting robbed. And it ended up ruining him because he lost his father figure. And that is where he had learned that with great power must also come great responsibility. And that's why he does what he does. And very early on in the Amazing Spider-Man run, they tackle themes of, him wanting to give up. But in Amazing Fantasy 15, it just shows you all that origin of why he doesn't give up. And yet, 8 pages, 8 perfect pages. You had the Steve Ditko artwork, the horror elements of it, concept designs of the costume.
Wait. Let's not call Spider-Man a horror comic. That's crazy.
That's not ridiculous. That's not far off to say.
That's not ridiculous to say.
That's not even an original idea that I have.
It's not.
Like, people say that. People say that the Spider-Man #1 comic or Amazing Fantasy 15 is it plays out like a horror comic. And it makes sense because Stan Lee and Steve Ditko worked on suspense and thrill comics before Spider-Man and before they did superhero comics.
What is the reason people say this?
The emotion that Peter has and that anger and how he displays it, like the scene where he's crawling up on the bad guy in the empty warehouse. He's crawling up and it's creepy. His anatomy, the type of body type that Peter has, it's tall and lanky, and playing into that with the spider, it's uncanny, especially for back then, right? And then the grand moment where he's grabbing onto the guy and he has the pupils. That's the only time he's ever had pupils in his mask. Like, that's intense. I'm definitely sure. Nowadays, is it a horror comic? No, you could read that and be like, oh yeah, this is cool. But like back then, dude, they were reading that comic and they were like, ooh, I'm getting the chills. You know what I mean?
There are like scarier things in that very comic book, dude. Like, I feel like that is like the
it's kind of like a Twilight Zone version of creepy. Like, it reads like it can read like a Twilight Zone episode.
Like, Spider-Man feels like a superhero origin story.
I think it's because I think it's because we have like an association with Spider-Man. Does that make sense? Like, we can't look at it in a bubble because he's too big.
I mean, Stan Lee said, like, I wanted to make a superhero with personal problems. I wanted him to be a teenager. And then he writes like the Bell Ringer and the Martian story, and like there's another story in there.
That's a subversion,
right?
Like it's
those
strange.
Are suspenseful thrillers about real people.
But you're discounting how Stan Lee is bringing that up because it's a strange concept, because it's weird. Like, all of the original Marvel books are subversions of classic superhero tropes. They're all like a turn or like they're spin on their head in a way. And Spider-Man is the same thing. That's why it's not in a superhero book. It's in a random ass fucking horror book that was getting canceled.
It didn't get put in that book because it was a horror book, and this was a horror story that fit with the theme of the book. It was put in that book because the book.
But
was
it is a
suspenseful.
suspenseful
It's
story.
almost like
just
it's
wanted to publish
suspenseful
the
though,
story.
and suspense and horror can go hand in hand. So if you don't think Spider-Man's a horror character, tell me about his whole horror era then, when he grew 6 arms and then fought a vampire and a werewolf and a fucking mummy. What are we talking about right now?
Those stories. I'm talking about the book.
Amazing Fantasy 15 is
The character lent himself to
Amazing
those
Fantasy.
stories because the horror concepts are already latent there. They didn't pull those concepts out of their ass.
Chris,
They're already there. Like, yeah, I know I'm cooking.
There's
Yeah.
nothing in Amazing Fantasy 15 that could have possibly led to Spider-Man growing 6 arms and battling a werewolf.
You like moving like a spider?
The powers of a spider can lead to him. What are you talking about? No, you're not.
They were plotting from that very.
It's the way
You-
he's
They did
moving.
that because
You are
they
not
did
cooking
it.
right now.
No, you're right. They weren't
They
plotting it. They weren't planning to. No, you're right. They weren't planning to do that. But the concept is
It
big
lends
enough.
itself to it.
Exactly.
It lends itself to it, sure. It doesn't have its genesis. It doesn't come from this story.
I think you just don't see the horror in
You just
your
don't get
body
it. It's okay.
physically changing.
It's okay. It's okay. You just
Like-
don't get it. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
I know it's hard.
you just
I know
don't
it's
get it,
hard
buddy.
To read a Silver Age comic book.
It's okay, buddy. You don't get it. Hey, buddy, it's okay not to understand.
Okay.
Carlos.
He's
Okay,
like, oh yeah, I got some money for.
It's okay. It's
and
okay.
Uncle
If
May.
you can't understand the
yeah,
comic,
that's
that's perfectly
awesome.
fine.
It's a little
I think
hard
it's-
for you to grasp. I
David
got you,
gets
buddy.
it, and he skips dialogue, but you
Right.
know,
We